Well, here he is here. As you can see, he's only got 5 points. G'day everyone. So I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather, so I thought I'd try and get a couple of videos done. And I had a request from a bloke called Caddy Rocky on YouTube, I believe, wanting basically some stories about my favourite hunts and the heads of those hunts. So thought a good opportunity today to go over that. First off the block is my very first sambar stag. Now this was back before I was doing a little bit of photography and a little bit of video work, but I think I was about 18 at the time when I shot this little stag. And I just basically, one day, I think it was after work, I'd finished night shift and the forecast looked really good up near where my parents lived, and I just decided that I was going to go shoot my first sambar. So I grabbed my Hauer 338 Win Mag and went up to the bush, borrowed Mum's car. At that time I didn't have a four-wheel drive, so borrowed Mum's car and drove out to one of the nearby properties that I had access to. And yeah, it was sort of starting to rain, and a few people might remember this story. It's actually in a very old Wild Deer magazine. I wrote an article about it. So yeah, anyway, I stalked into the gully and I'd probably only got in about 200 meters. I was walking really, really slowly. Rain was sort of misty, very quiet underfoot. The bush was nice and quiet, and yeah, I just sort of stopped every few meters and was glassing. And yeah, before long I heard sort of something in the distance, and I looked over and noticed this guy sort of feeding his way around in the gully. And yeah, I think the shot was, I can't even remember the exact distance, maybe like 150 yards, something like that. And yeah, I shot him and he ran around, and yeah, he piled up basically there's a little dam inside that gully, and he piled up in the dam. So I was by myself and I had to drag him out, and I took every skerrick of meat, and I remember positioning him into photos and that, and it was a very busy afternoon. Unfortunately, I won't have any footage to share of that hunt, but I just thought I would explain it. And yeah, that was my very first sambar deer. Next up, I've got this billy goat here, which I took with Nick Morton. From memory, it's around a 34 inch goat, somewhere around there. And I drove a long way up there to catch up with Nick. We'd sort of already been in discussion about quite a few things. It was not long after he'd just started Oscut Broadheads, and basically, yeah, he asked me to come up and to do a video with him. I'd only been doing YouTube for sort of a short while at that point, but I was starting to get right into bow hunting, and you know, I'd taken a few critters with the bow, so it was pretty cool to get up there. And I think this was on day number 2. Could have been the first day, but I think day number 2. Yeah, we stalked it on these mob of billies, and yeah, I managed to slip an arrow in. It was pretty close range. I think I've got the shot on camera somewhere, so I should be able to include that in this video. And I just remember that trip being so cold and crazy. Just shot that goat at, it's about 10 yards, maybe less. It's just gone down. We've waited a couple of minutes, watched it go down. Shot was really good, high lung, broke the offside shoulder. It's just rolled onto the arrow, so I think I've got a broken FMJ down there, but Oscut's performed absolutely perfect. That was a very memorable trip, very, very cold. We were struggling to pull our bows back at some point because it was so bloody cold. But yeah, I'll never forget this head. Like, this sits out in the rafters, but even when I got requested to do this video, I had a quick look over some of the heads and thought, what heads am I actually going to talk about in the video? And this goat head was, yeah, straight away I saw it and was like, I've got to do a quick talk about that, because it was a very fun trip. Great friendship was built based off that trip, and yeah, a trip I'll never forget. Alright, the last of the skull-capped heads. This stag here, you can see the mass on him. I shot this, I think it was last year, the year before, on a backpack hunt with Remy. I was just out on a solo trip. I was actually chasing a different stag, but on the I walked in, set up camp, and I remember Remy and I sort of went and looked at a couple of wallows nearby, and I was watching her body language, and she just started wind scenting really good. and I've got footage of it, and I was following her, and it was all live. I don't know whether you've seen the video, but if you haven't seen the full length video of this hunt, probably one of my favorite videos that I've done, just because, you know, a lot of people reenact things and go back and basically try and fill in the story with extra footage after the fact. But when I did it, it was all live. And I just remember following Remy with my phone. I'm telling the camera kind of thing that, you know, Remy can smell a deer, and she gets to this little edge and she stops. And I knew I was close. I knew we were close to the deer, just watching Rem. And after a while, I finally basically saw a bit of the antler, got hold of the stag in the binos, and it was only probably 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Like, it was pretty early. Sun was beaming down, and just, yeah, I remember seeing this deer bedded. I didn't have the gun set up or anything, so I had to load around, and I was trying to get footage of it on the big camera as well, and it was it was a little bit of a mess, but we got there in the end. And yeah, he stood up and walked a few steps, and I fired a shot, which I didn't do a proper autopsy on him, to be fair. I can't even remember whether I hit him on the first shot, but I definitely hit him on the second shot. And Rem sort of went down after him, and yeah, basically she kept an eye on him while he passed, and I grabbed the rest of my gear and went down. And yeah, this very, very cool stag was there. So a hunt I'll never forget. I was nearly gonna get this thing mounted, just because I never would have seen that deer without Rem. There was, in the country I was in, where this stag was, you couldn't glass, you couldn't do anything except bush stalk. And where I was stalking was a couple 100 meters away from where this was bedded. So without Remy leading me in, I wouldn't have got this deer. And yeah, basically very cool hunt owing this deer to Rem. Like I said, if you haven't seen the full length video of this hunt, definitely recommend you checking that out, because there is some really cool footage. That's going to be it for these heads. I'm going to take you inside now, and we'll go over the proper taxidermy work, and I'll give a little recap of them. First up, got this tahr here. It's mounted by Adam Moore in Mansfield, Northeast Taxidermy. And I shot this tahr on day 5 of an 8-day trip. It was a fly-in trip on Mount Cook. And yeah, absolutely got spent that whole week just busting our asses trying to get a tahr each. There was 5 of us, 4 of us managed to get a tahr. John unfortunately missed out that trip, but he'd passed up quite a few sort of younger tahr in hope to get a bigger one. It just didn't pan out for him, but yeah, I was very stoked to get this one. Not the biggest tahr in the world, but damn, I worked for it. And in the end, I think the shot was at 485 yards across this sort of rocky canyon. And I remember Zach and I trying to find it and get over there in time before it got dark and not get cliffed out. It was just a crazy, crazy hunt. Next up, got my bow shot sambar with Remy. If you haven't watched the full length video of that, highly recommend you do that. In fact, yeah, if you can, go back and watch all the full length videos of these hunts, because it'll make a lot more sense than me just doing a quick explanation of what happened. But basically with this one, I'd been hunting this spot for quite a while, knew there was a few stags in the area, came in one morning, saw this stag with a hind, and I ended up alerting him, and I didn't mean to, but yeah, he got on to me, and I thought the shot was going to be like a 20-yard shot. I didn't have time to range it. I just sent an arrow, and he was a lot further away than I thought. Clipped his leg, had a couple of drops of blood. He sort of took off, and I was really pissed off. I knew it was a bad shot. I knew he was going to survive, so I was happy about that. But I was annoyed at myself for just not making the shot count. Anyway, Remy was pretty young at the time, and she wanted to track the couple of specks of blood. And long story short, 2 hours later, we were still tracking him, and she ended up putting it up. And every now and again, I'd see this speck of blood, and just couldn't believe that Rem was still tracking him. And yeah, longer story short, Remy ended up bailing him down in the base of the gully, and she was running around circling him, barking. And I wish to this day that I had a GoPro or some sort of camera on, so I could show everyone what actually went down, because it was absolutely unreal just seeing this little German wave pointer trying to bail this stag by herself. And I went down there and put another arrow in him, and he ran like 50 meters and just piled up. So Then I had to call a mate in to help me cape it out and get it out of there because I was a long way in. I'd been all day without water. The water I did have, I gave to Remy, so it was just an unreal day. Probably still to this day, probably the most memorable, favourite hunt I've ever done, and that's pretty cool. You know, like I've been to New Zealand twice and that, and just that local hunt, it's only, you know, hour and a half from home to that spot, and yeah, to have that happen, I don't know if anything will ever top it. And before I move on, I'll just mention this head here was mounted by Gavin Council, and as with everything he's done for us, we're super happy with his mounts, and same with Adam Moore from Northeast Taxidermy. I get questioned quite a bit about who I recommend, and those two guys have both been absolutely awesome taxidermists for us, so strongly recommend you guys check them out if you ever need any heads done. And next up, got this beast of a stag, still my personal best stag to date. He was 31.5 inches long on his longest side, both brows I think around 16.5 inches, and the way this hunt worked out, I was hunting a property, I can't remember how old I was, maybe 19 or so, and I think I've got a little bit of footage a week or two before I shot him. It was sort of way back in an open paddock, and I knew that there was a lot of length in the antlers, but I tried to get in closer for a shot. Back then I couldn't shoot long range, I didn't have the capabilities. I think my 338 Win Mag was sort of, I'd set it up for about 400 yards and that was sort of it. Anyway, I kept going back, and where I wanted to sort of sit off, there was nothing happening, so I ended up ducking in, and I was walking down on this dry creek bed. I was actually in the state forest side, and I'm walking down this dry creek bed, and I remember starting to sort of make my way towards the private boundary. I had access on the private, and as I come out near the fence line, I saw some antler. I saw a couple of deer, and this big stag here was rutting with a couple of hinds, and I just remember putting the gun up and just shooting. Like I don't even really remember taking it all in. I just remember shooting, and I was still on this little game trail, and as soon as I shot, the hinds were scattered, and this stag here ran back in onto the game trail I was on, and I remember just trying to reload. So I reloaded the rifle and shot one off the hip because he's coming right towards me, only a couple of meters away. But in reloading, I hadn't picked up the next round, so I'd ejected my case from the first shot, but I didn't bring the bolt back far enough to pick up the next round. So the gun just goes click. The stag hears that as he's running at me, and he sort of veers around, nearly brushes his antler on my arm, and then he ran maybe another 30-40 meters down and then just piled up. And I just remember sort of just thinking, holy crap, same thing, wish I had a GoPro or something on, like, just, you know, these sort of things happen whenever you're not filming. But I gave him a couple of minutes, let him pass. I think I might have some footage somewhere. I'll try and dig it up of when that all went down.
And I ducked down into this thick stuff, and I was just stalking down. There's an old creek bed just down in here, and I was trying to get through there. It was a bit thick, so I come back up, and I saw a few sambar, and I was only 20 yards away, so I just had to shoot, and he's just down in here. There you can see he's behind. Well, here he is here. As you can see, he's only got 5 points, but I like the unusual ones, and I'm absolutely over the moon. It's still a pretty special moment to sort of get one on deck. You probably wouldn't have been long from casting, and it's a very good reward for all the effort and time put into chasing them. So I'm really happy. Anyway, I'm gonna get to work on getting this head off and taking some of the meat off him.
And yeah, went over to him, and at first when I saw him I was like, he's probably like 27, 28, something like that. And I took some meat off him and just ring barked him. I didn't even cape him out on the spot there. When I first saw him, I thought, you know, I'm gonna shoot one better than that soon, so I won't worry about caping him. And I got him home and measured him at my parents' place, and yeah, then I was kind of thinking, shit, maybe I should have caped him out. But huge thanks to Maury at Northeast Taxidermy. He sourced a cape and did an absolutely magnificent job. And yeah, that hunt there will live on forever in this lounge room. And finally, got our last two on the wall here. This big stag was the one Stu shot, which I think was last year. There's a full length video on that. I'm not going to talk too much about that one because my brother shot it. But there is a full length video on that. It was an absolutely epic hunt. I might just quickly... Basically what had happened, we were on this property. I'd hunted it for years. I'd never seen a really good head. I'd seen a few decent ones, but on our walkout, we hadn't seen a deer. On our walkout, see this deer cross the back fire break and just goes in the edge of the thick stuff. And after a while, finally got eyes on him. Knew that he was pretty decent, but couldn't get really good eyes on his body, which you'll see on the camera. Like,
you're right.
It was, yeah, a bit of a struggle. Stu didn't really know where to aim, but he had his 338 lap. It was his brand new rifle, and basically I just told him just to send one. Got him. Good job. Nicely done, man. So anyway, he did and absolutely nailed it, and got over there. Seen it was a good deer, so we caped it out, got out of there, and Gavin Council mounted that one and came up really, really good. New Zealand Seeker deer from the North Island, another trip with John Nichols, very good mate of mine. Every time we do a hunt, it's always very epic. I don't know whether you've seen the tuna video I've recently posted, but same thing. Every time we do something, it's always revolves minimal sleep, lots of driving and traveling, but something awesome normally always happens at the end of it. And same thing with this trip. I think we were in there for 7 days, and I shot this stag on the very first day. We had just set up camp, and then we were walking along the ridge where we had to drop down to the creek to get our water. There was no water up at our camp, and as we were walking along, I glassed this one up. It was sleeping on the side of the hill, which I should be able to get some footage of. And yeah, that was such a relief for me. And yeah, him letting me shoot it, like, I was expecting him to want to shoot it, which would have been completely fair enough. Luckily for us, I think on day 5 or 6, no, it might have been day 3. I can't even remember what day it was. Anyway, one of the days later, John actually shot a better stag than this one, so it all worked out in the end. He made the right move letting me shoot this one, but yeah, it was just an unreal trip. Absolutely love New Zealand, and I cannot wait to go back. But anyway, I hope that's answered your question, Caddy Rocky. Hopefully that explains enough of some of my favourite heads and the favourite hunts behind them. And yeah, if you guys have any other requests for videos or anything like that, chuck a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of this. Hopefully it was entertaining and you weren't too bored by me rambling on about these hunts. Cheers.